or anything? No.
No.
Okay. Well, I'll just tell them to go to our Patreon. Well, this is a Patreon show, so I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here we go. I'm in three, two, one. Good evening. This is the official October Patreon show for our patrons here at Open Micers Podcast. My name is Jason Robbins,
I'm Jacob Craig.
and we have returning guest Mr. Wallace Phelps.
Hello.
Hello. So
How are
Jacob,
things?
good. Jacob, tell everybody what we're doing this evening and why Mr. Wallace is back in the fold.
Well, what we're doing is we're talking about our favorite horror movies in honor of Horror Month. We're doing
Ooh.
Horror Month for most of the month here on Open Micers, and we brought in Wally because who better to talk about movies and horror than the award-winning comedy writer Wally Phelps, who helped write Monsters Anonymous. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. So that being said, if you have not seen Monsters Anonymous, it is free on Amazon Prime, and it's the perfect movie to watch for Halloween. It's only, it's barely 22 minutes long, and it's got a lot of cool makeup effects in it, and special effects, and zombies, and the original horror icons. Go watch it; you'll like it.
I hope so.
And it's got Dante, because he wasn't even supposed to be there
Yeah.
today.
And it's got Wally.
Yeah, it's got Wally too.
I
And the,
was
runs.
and the funniest moment of the movie to this day.
probably the last time I'll ever run. Yeah.
So Jacob, how are we going to do this? You're the ringleader here for this
All right.
episode.
I'll moderate, boys. I'll moderate. First off, I want to talk to Wally because Wally, our viewers have not seen you in a solid 20 weeks. So what have you been doing in this last 20 weeks since everyone's heard from you?
Fuck all.
Yeah.
No, it's like so. Okay, I've been doing writing. I've been doing, but I haven't really been working on any stand up or anything like that. It's the problem I'm running into is that during that 20-week period, I have been gravely ill multiple times. I've been in the hospital since then. I've just, it's been a rough go. In fact, I think I'm getting sick right now as I'm talking to you, and that is not a joke. It's, um, otherwise, I am wasting a lot of money on my Ghostbusters costume that I'll probably never be able to wear again because nobody's doing anything in person. But ooh, let me show you something real quick. I'll be here in a second. Talking about stuff.
I know what he's getting.
Is he getting his proton pack?
Yeah, no, the new wand for it that he bought.
Oh yeah, I saw it on
That
Facebook
thing's
the other
pretty
day.
awesome. There it is.
So those of you at home who's not on my Facebook,
Oh, uh-oh. Does it? I like it.
That's pretty fucking awesome, man. That's perfect for horror month.
Yeah. Whoa, that's
I
cool.
purposely didn't put Ghostbusters on my list because that's obvious.
Yeah.
And
Right, yeah.
But there's an argument to be made.
Yeah. I kinda excluded comedy from my list as well, because it would just dominate the whole thing with
Right.
Shaun of the Dead and those kind of films.
I've got
But,
one that is on the line.
On the line.
Yeah, and I tried to pick movies I didn't think y'all would pick, except for maybe one.
Gotcha. So did you make up like a top 5?
Yes.
Okay. So we can just do a general discussion of our favorite horror movies. Do you
Okay.
guys want to do that?
Well, we can do that.
Yeah, I'm down with either one.
Jason, I know that you're a huge proponent of Halloween 3,
Yes. You can say that.
as if we haven't talked about that enough on the show already.
Yeah. I don't know if there's much more I can say about it, especially if you follow me or listen to my shows. We did a whole episode, the Derek Diamond Experience last year. Last year we did Halloween Horror Month, and on Nerd Cave Retro we did two separate shows. One for Nerd Cave Retro where we talked about Halloween 1 and 2, and then we skipped over to the Derek Diamond Experience and we talked about Halloween 3. And of course, I talked about Halloween 3 at length last week, so I don't want to subject
And the week
people
before.
and the week before. So I don't want to subject people to that again. All I can say is it gets a lot more hate than it deserves because it is such a cool, weird sci-fi horror movie. Honestly, I wouldn't even say it's horror. It's more sci-fi thriller type of a movie. And the only reason it gets the hate that it does is because it's got that Halloween. It says Halloween 3 on it, and it doesn't have Michael Myers in it. That's the only reason people hate it. If it was just called Season of the Witch, people would probably be much more beloved than it is. But I kind of like being a part of the kind of the cult following of that movie because I have been such a proponent of that movie for 30 years because I love it so much, and it feels like, it's mine. Because everybody else doesn't like it, so it's mine. I can have it.
Yeah. Wally, do you feel the same way about Halloween 3?
I like Halloween 3. I'm not saying it's the greatest movie ever made like Jason does. I think Jason overhypes it because it's underhyped.
I don't think it's the greatest
very
movie ever
true.
made. It's got its problems, but at the same time, I just like the way the movie. I like the science fiction aspect of it. I like the the sort of like bringing in the druid aspect of it, and like the weird, like the stuff with Stonehenge and all that, and it's just a weird movie, and I like it because it's weird.
Right. And I think most of my favorite horror movies are my favorite because of the fact that they are out there.
Yeah.
There's not many other movies like that, and if it is like other movies, that's intentional. They're trying to evoke classic horror movies or comment on them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy something that either could really happen or something that is just unsettling. And Halloween 3 is unsettling.
Yeah. Because there's no other, like, a lot of movies evoke other movies. Some movies take from other movies, like, Halloween the original Halloween movie, it set up the template for the slasher genre. If it wasn't for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, kind of setting up the that's the original kind of slasher, but then Halloween comes along and sets all these rules for it, and it's kind of like that.
Right.
Halloween 3 doesn't really, there's no other movie even close to what Halloween 3 is because it's so out there. I can't think of any other movie that you can look to and be like, oh yeah, they got that from that, or it's like this, because it's science fiction, and then it goes completely like in left field with the whole Stonehenge thing and the original warlocks and witches and all that, and it's just so weird that there's nothing out there like it.
It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, that's something that we talked about last episode. Like, the more paranormal stuff doesn't really scare me anymore. It's like the realistic things that can actually happen. Like the movie Split, which isn't really seen as a horror movie, scared the shit out of me because a psycho like that could actually exist. It could actually kidnap a bunch of teenage girls and, do to them what he did. Same with maybe the original Saw movie. Someone could kidnap two people and play that kind of game with them and, make them saw off one of their legs or arms.
See,
Like
that's
it's
why I don't really like, you know, that's not really horror to me. That's like gore porn. Like,
a
the
little bit.
Saw
Well,
series and Hostel, all those kind of movies.
I look at the torture porn genre. It's a subset of horror, very much like
Yeah.
slasher films are, supernatural films. Torture porn is horror, but it's a different type of horror than the other ones. I mean, if you had to set it up in comedy, drama, horror, and children's movie, it would go right in there because that's how video stores used to be set up.
Yeah.
Knowing how old I am, and
Right.
so where else would they go? So that's how I
And
feel.
don't get me wrong, like the Saw sequels are just absolutely nothing but gore. Like you don't really get any horror satisfaction out of those. But the original Saw, for what it was, with two film students just shooting this movie and creating like a cultural phenomenon, and the plot of that movie, and I mean, it's so iconic that it's been ripped off 1,000 times now.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
that's a good horror movie. The first one is a good horror movie.
But the thing, I disagree. I hated the first Saw movie.
It's
I
okay.
really
It's okay
did.
to disagree.
I watched that movie, and honestly, I was okay with it until the ending, because when that happened, yet sure I can spoil a movie that's that old, but when he stands up, I'm like, bullshit. There's no way he would have been there that long for that still. Bullshit. I'm done with this movie. And then I flipped the table and went off.
But to be fair, I mean, that is still possible. It's still technically possible. And that's what scares me, is shit that could possibly happen.
Yeah.
Like if the next big horror movie was about a mass shooting, it would scare the shit out of me, because that's commonplace now.
Yeah.
Right. Hell, I've actually written that horror movie.
Really?
Forever ago. It does not exist anymore on any format.
Yeah.
But at this time, it's like, when would you release it? Because it would always be too soon.
Exactly, right. But that's the kind of shit, like, that's what's gonna happen next, man. I mean, a horror movie is just gonna be a historical thriller.
Right. Oh my god.
But let's talk about some classic horror movies, guys. What old horror movies do you guys like? Like before 1970? Like what, baseline horror films are you guys into?
1970.
Well, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Universal monsters. My favorite. I mean, I guess you'd call it a horror movie. My favorite horror movie pre 1970 is The Creature from the Black Lagoon. That's my favorite of the Universal horror movies.
And believe it or not, that's the only Universal horror movie I have never seen.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it was very hard to come by for me. I don't know why. I watched the rest of them with, like, they had the VHSs in the library, and so I seen the Wolfman and Dracula and all of them until I got to that point. I think they had like a set, and somebody either just didn't return it, or stole it or something. I don't know. But that's the one I just didn't get to see. I never got around to seeing it.
I do like Alfred Hitchcock as well. Like I like The Birds, and I like Psycho. But at the Psycho's one of those movies, like, you can watch it once or twice, and then you're like, I'm good. Don't need to rewatch it.
Like,
the best thing about Psycho were the twists and turns in the plot, and once you know the magic trick, it's not as fun to go through it.
Yeah,
exactly. Kind of like Fight Club. Like, you watch Fight Club the first time, and you're like, oh shit, and then you watch it the second time to see, what all you missed because of the ending, and then you never watch it again.
Like any M. Night Shyamalan movie. They're like good for 2 watches tops.
Exactly. I mean, you watch it the second time to see how you couldn't get to the twist, and then you just never watch it again. I think my favorite movie horror movie before 1970 is probably The Wolf Man, because
Yeah.
it had both Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney in it, and that like blew my mind seeing the guy that played Dracula not playing Dracula, but also being with the Wolf Man.
The
And
shared
I
universe.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I also really like Nosferatu because that just sends shivers up my fucking spine, dude.
Yeah.
Right. Max
The
Schreck
ori-
is one of the most creepy looking guys I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Like that movie still scares the shit out of me. Like even it was made in 1922, and I still
Right.
can't look at it without being just
Yeah.
absolutely terrified.
Oh, and I
Like,
can't.
and it's so iconic too because I don't know if a lot of younger people know the movie, but when you see that shadow, like that outline on the wall, it's like, ooh, no, thank you.
And there's pretty much
Right.
nowhere you can't stream it these days. Like I always see it like on Netflix or Amazon Prime. Like it's pretty much everywhere that you want to watch it. Another movie I forgot was pre-70s was Night of the Living Dead too,
Mhm.
because it came out in 60. I think it was filmed in 68, came out in 69. I think.
Right. They're coming to get you, Barbara.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. Love that movie.
Yeah, you can't really talk about specifically the zombie genre without talking about Night of the Living Dead.
It's an interesting story too because the whole thing started very similar to the way Monsters Anonymous got started. It was a bunch of filmmakers with downtime between seasons of Mister Rogers' Neighborhood, believe it or not. And that's where the crew came from, and they filmed this movie while they were in that downtime. It's a very interesting
And it's
story.
it's the perfect movie to make when you have that downtime, because all you need is one one place, like one location and a couple of your main actors, and then you just pretty much just get all your friends and family to come in to play zombies, which
Yeah.
sounds like what we did.
Right. Now, I'm not saying that our movie is as good as Night of the Living Dead, but
Has
I'm
the
not
same spirit.
saying it either.
It has
Well-
it had the spirit and the punk rock, spirit of it.
Right.
Yeah, I'll tell you this: it was a lot funnier.
um,
So you got that going for you.
The ending was a lot more uplifting as well.
but you had a lot of good, horror sci-fi movies in like around the 50s, but they weren't, they didn't have a lot of money, so they weren't that great. But then you had people like John Carpenter come along and remake them, in the 80s, like John Carpenter with The Thing. You watch the original Thing back in the 50s, it's not that
From
great.
outer space.
And then you have the John Carpenter's Thing, and it's one of the greatest horror movies ever made. And
Right.
the special effects still hold up to this day. Like those effects are groundbreaking for what they did.
Yeah,
And-
that's for sure, man. John Carpenter is definitely a legend when it comes to horror movies.
And the 70s was a weird era for horror movies too, and for cinema in general, until Star Wars came along and kind of brought joy back into it. Because you look at most of the movies that came out from the 70s, it was all about like vigilantes and stuff like that. And then the horror movies were like, you had weird horror movies like Suspiria and the the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out in '74, and that kind of set the template for, like the slasher genre. But it really didn't take hold until Halloween, which was in '79 or '78. I mean.
Right. Yeah, and you can't talk about 1970s horror movies without mentioning Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Alien.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Alien, as far as sci-fi horror goes, they're still doing shit with the Alien series, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That it's basically it's a haunted house story in space, is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even the tagline, like in space, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah.
Fucking sinister. I mean, and just those three films alone, like in the 1970s, that's maybe the three big ones. That's maybe all that really anyone remembers from that period.
Hmm.
But they're three trendsetters for still like what we do in horror today.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is in that movie and Jaws have the same problem where the more they showed the monster of the piece, the less scary it got.
Do you consider Jaws
Right.
to be a horror movie?
What, Jaws?
Yeah.
I mean, the American Film Institute does, so I guess.
Yeah. I do, and I'll tell you why. Because the intent of that movie was to scare.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't to make you laugh. It wasn't to make you cry. It wasn't to make you feel like you're in love. The intent was to scare, so therefore it's a horror movie.
Yeah, it wasn't action packed.
Right. I mean, the only action sequence you get is Jaws eating the boat. And yeah, it looked fucking stupid because it's an animatronic shark, but I mean, they still wanted it to be scary.
Yeah.
But I mean, the biggest era for horror movies is inarguably the 80s.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, there was so much to come out of the 80s. And my favorite horror movie of all time was made in the 80s, and it is The Poltergeist. To me, nothing will ever surpass The Poltergeist because it's the classic ghost movie, and every ghost movie after Poltergeist is ripping off Poltergeist.
I just watched Poltergeist again a few weeks ago, and that movie still gets me every time I watch it. I don't know what it is about that movie, but it's just
Well,
it holds up.
it goes
like
back to what I
crazy.
said earlier. It's unsettling.
Yeah.
You know, it takes this. It takes something that you find comfortable, your home, and then it makes it sinister. And that is the hallmark of great horror because what would you do? I mean,
Exactly.
what can you do?
You know what
your
I would
house,
do?
you're kind of trapped there.
I'll tell you the first thing I'd do is I would grab my family and I would douse that house in gasoline and burn it the hell down. Is what I would do.
I mean, that wouldn't do anything because they didn't move the bodies.
Yeah, man. And you know, a lot of people a big thing I've seen on the internet, not recently, but in the last few years, is that people say that Insidious is so scary because during the daytime you think that you're safe. And they showed, you know, the demon or the ghost or whatever during the daytime.
Right.
And I'm like, did you even fucking see Poltergeist? Like,
Right.
the shit's happening during the day still. Like, they're taking that aspect from Poltergeist. Like every ghost movie, fucking Paranormal Activity, Insidious, The Conjuring, all that shit, they take things from the Poltergeist, every single one of them, and they use it in their movie.
But in Poltergeist, they do the things that are just so damn creepy. Like when she's in the kitchen and you've got that nice pan shot where she's picking up the dishes off the dining table. It pans over to her, put the dishes in the sink. Carol Ann's sitting there watching the TV, of course, like with her face up against the TV. And then you whips back around to the table, and the chairs are all stacked up to the ceiling in this weird geometric shape. And that was all done in one take. There were no cuts. As soon as they moved it, all the PAs and stuff, or whatever, the special effects guys ran in, stacked the chairs up, and then it was within like 10 seconds. And when you do stuff like that practically, it's so unsettling. And just the way that movie was shot, the way the actors, like their performances, and just the weird effects of that movie. The little lady at the end, this house is clean. Like she's just so that whole movie just gives me the chills.
It was.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, her voice makes everything's spoopy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Have you guys seen the Poltergeist remake?
No, I didn't
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, absolute dog shit. Don't fucking watch it.
Kind of.
I don't find any reason for it to exist.
No, I went to see it in theaters because I was such a big Poltergeist fan, and they didn't even have the old lady in it. They replaced her with like some badass old man ghost hunter, and I'm
What's the
like,
point?
it's just so dumb, man.
Might as well have Dan Aykroyd in full gear.
I haven't seen too many horror movies the last couple of years that really get me the way those older movies did. I mean, there are movies
Right.
that I like, but they're comedy horror movies, like Tucker and Dale versus Evil. What was the one?
Hotep.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, Bubba Hotep.
yeah, Bubba Hotep, and then you had The Cabin in the Woods. The last really scary movie, well, straight up horror movie that I saw that was really good was the Evil Dead remake.
Well, I don't know. I like the new Halloween.
Yeah, that too. I did like the new Halloween movie.
But, I don't watch a lot of new horror movies, and the reason for that is because of the fact that they've all become very samey.
Yeah.
And I watched Paranormal Activity because that was supposed to be like the end all be all of new horror, and it was garbage. So I was like, you know what? I'm never watching another horror movie past this point because I'm tired of wasting my life on this.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
halfway through the movie, I was like, kill this dude.
Yeah.
Rip his face off.
Because I
Do
watch,
something.
I watch like the Insidious and all those kind of movies, and they just don't do anything for me. And then you got all the same actors are all in the same movies, and it's just like, all right, it's another one of these. It's like cookie cutter. They've become cookie cutter at this point.
Right.
Right, yeah. And I mean, I think my favorite horror, like recent horror movie, has to be the It remake.
Yes.
Like,
Part
That's
one was
it.
really good.
yes.
yes,
Part one.
that's what I'm saying. Part 1 was really good. Part 2, if they didn't make that movie, I wouldn't care.
Yeah. Part two is like supplemental material.
Yes.
It just seems so unnecessary. I understand. I read the book when the first movie came out, and so I was familiar with what was going to happen in this movie, but they cut all of the interesting part. All of the history of it,
Yeah.
all of the creepy coincidences and the murders and the mobsters and all of the good parts they left out.
Yeah.
They did change the way they defeat it, which is great because that was bonkers as shit.
Speaking of Stephen King, and he's been having a renaissance lately with all of his stuff being turned into really good stuff. And even though it's not a movie, I'm very much looking forward to the Stand series, and I
Yep.
hope they do it well. Really do, because that's one of my favorite Stephen King books. It was one of the very first ones very first book I ever read that was that big. Like that was like 1,200 pages for that book.
Right.
And I couldn't put it down. And I did like the original miniseries on ABC. It's okay, but I really hope they do it justice with this new miniseries.
It is the longest book I've ever read.
It's only like 4 pages shorter than The Stand, or 4 pages longer, something like that.
Something like that. Because that is a hefty book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lofty task to turn that into a film and do it justice. Any book
Right.
that's big like that. That's why I think they turned Stephen King's Under the Dome into a TV series. Because
Right.
that's the thickest book I think I've ever seen in person. Is Stephen King's Under the Dome, and that was a good show. They canceled it for no fucking reason, man.
Yeah.
The ratings were good and everything.
I don't know if the ratings were good, but the material was good.
I think the ratings went down after the second season because that was only supposed to be a miniseries. But then it did so well, they were like, all right, well, we need to expand this. And then they did, and everybody hated it.
Here's all the non-Stephen King parts.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
What do you guys think about the newest horror movie that really has everyone talking is A Quiet Place. Have you guys seen that?
I haven't had a chance to see it yet. It's I don't. Is it streaming anywhere? Because that's really what really kept me away from
I
it.
don't think so. I liked it. I did watch it a couple of months ago. Well, back when it was still relatively new to home video market.
Home video.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the theater. I missed it in the theater, but I enjoyed it. But it's not something I'll watch numerous times. Like one time was good enough because once you kind of know
Right.
what's it's another one of those movies like, I don't really need to watch it again.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that it is a horror movie, and it is, supposed to be scary, but you watch it for the plot. Like, the plot is
Yeah,
what's good. The plot is the meat of the story. The meat of the movie isn't, sending chills down your spine. And for me, it's because, mainly this is never going to fucking happen. So it's like,
and that's the
why
thing
is
is
this gonna scare me?
you have a movie like that has such an original premise like that, and then you're gonna see like what happened. There were so many copycats of that movie coming out now.
Well,
That's true.
I think the main thing with that movie is I think they were answering a question that I often ask myself when I'm writing horror is what's the scariest thing you can think of? And I really believe John Krasinski's answer was that my children die.
Yeah,
And I think that's really what he was going where he was coming from. So I think people who don't have children or anything like that would approach it in a different way. It's kind of like Inside Out, or
Maybe,
that's
yeah.
which isn't a horror movie. Might as well be. There's people living in our brains, but it's that kind of thing where the story doesn't really resonate as much for people who aren't in that scenario. Who don't have that thought.
yeah,
So, because honestly, whenever I was writing for that idea, it was a very similar idea. These two people are separated by this cataclysmic event, and he's looking for his 6-year-old daughter, and then he a lost child comes into the group while they're searching. Turns out the lost child is a creature that's killing everybody.
it's a good idea.
See, that's why I don't trust children.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, you go that way. Find your parents.
Speaking of not trusting children, how about Frailty? Either of you seen that movie?
I haven't seen it.
Oh my god. Bill Paxton,
Oh yeah, I did see that movie. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
where he was a demon hunter,
Yes.
or so he says. And his two kids are on opposite ends of whether or not the demons are real or if he's just a crazy murderer and they're helping him murder people.
Yeah.
And it is an amazing movie.
I love that movie. I've seen it several times. I just never remember the name of it. And when you say Frailty, it doesn't ring like as that movie.
Right. Well, yeah, the title could be better because I think people should be talking about it more because
Yes.
it was so well put together and the ending was so out of left field. I mean, you might have been able to come up with what's going to happen. Since this is a lesser known movie, I'm not going to tell you what happened. But, oh my God. Matthew McConaughey's in it, and he's really good.
Ooh.
Isn't it Elijah Woods, the other brother? I think he's in it. I don't know. I can't remember. I know McConaughey and Paxton's in it. So it's really good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That sounds like it would be right up my alley.
But when you're talking about like iconic horror movies, you got to go back to the 80s. You got
Right.
all your John
sure.
Carpenter stuff. You got The Thing. You've got They Live, which is more of a sci-fi. I wouldn't necessarily. I guess it falls in the horror category, sort
I
of.
mean, that's kind of like saying 28 Days Later is a sci-fi, which,
Yeah.
but it's also a horror movie.
Of course, you got all the the Halloween movies in the '80s. You've got the Friday the 13th,
Yeah,
Nightmare on Elm
it boils
Street.
down to slashers, man.
Yeah,
It's the slashers are what sell, and when you say horror, you think slashers.
Right.
You know,
Although my
like
favorite horror movie is from that era is Evil Dead 2. So it's
yes,
not a slasher movie.
that was.
Uh,
If you ask my opinion, that was kind of the really the launching point for comedy horror. Was that
Mhm.
movie?
and, it. I think that the reason why I love it so much is because it doesn't take itself so seriously, but
Yeah,
at the same time, it endears you to the characters in such a way where you're really worried about what's going to happen.
yeah,
And I think, and by the end of it, he becomes a gun-toting badass. It's like where the demons, like the Applehead demon, is what they call it. I'll swallow your soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, swallow this. And it's like, yeah,
Oh yeah,
right? Yeah, I mean, comedy horror is definitely an entirely different thing for sure
right.
because
Like
it's.
other than that, it would be the Frighteners.
yeah.
I've never seen that actually.
Frighteners is great. Frighteners is really good. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a horror movie, but it definitely leans more towards kind of a Ghostbusters style of comedy
Oh.
horror.
Yeah, because it's but the twist is the Ghostbuster in the sense is working with the ghosts.
Yeah,
The ghosts will go to these houses, scare the people, and this guy will show up and basically exorcise the house while the ghosts are really just talking shit to him. It's like, do we really got to do this bullshit for the rest of eternity? That kind of thing. And it's and then but it really gets to a horror sensibility once the Reaper comes,
yeah,
and he's the only one that can see it, and it starts murdering people in front of him and making it look like he's the one doing it.
yeah.
And it's great.
Watch
It's
the
Michael
Frighteners.
Fox is the lead.
Because speaking of the
Who is?
Frighteners, that's
Michael J. Fox.
Oh, okay.
because speaking of
And
the Frighteners, that's
Peter
when
Jackson directed it.
when you get into the '90s, you got a whole different brand of horror because once the '80s started to come to a close, the slasher genre got so oversaturated, and
Right.
it was just it kind of became a joke of itself. That way, you had movies like Scream come in and completely turn
Yeah.
everything on its head. And then you had Wes
Well,
Craven's New Nightmare and things like
Right.
that.
In the Mouth of Madness
Yes.
is in that time frame.
That's actually one of my favorite movies of all time. Is In the Mouth
Right.
of Madness.
What's the other? Oh, Event Horizon's another
Oh.
great example
That
of 90s horror.
that is a frightening movie because it's very unsettling.
Right. Oh, Sam Neill is perfection.
Yes.
Mwah.
Have you ever
It's
seen Event
It's
Horizon?
terrible. That movie is terrible when you watch it. But the performance,
Which one's Event Horizon again?
they're in a ship.
Okay, no, I haven't seen it. I
Okay.
don't think I have.
It's a spaceship that here's a beacon, and they go to check it out, and it turns out that it's like this spaceship that they've been looking for, and they want to know what happened to the crew and everything. So it's kind of this mystery at first, but once you realize what happened, it's just pants on head crazy.
Have you ever
Okay.
played the Dead Space video games?
No.
Basically, the Dead Space video games are like completely like an homage to Event Horizon. Like the whole
Okay.
feeling and aesthetic of Dead Space is straight from Event Horizon.
Interesting.
All right. I'll add it to the fucking list, I guess.
Yes. And if you haven't seen In the Mouth of Madness, you need to add that to the list too, especially if you're
Yeah.
if you're a Stephen King fan, because it's basically a movie about Stephen King. Is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last time we talked about that movie, you told me that I had to watch it.
Yes, you
So.
do.
But so let's get, because we're coming towards the end
Yeah.
of this. So let's talk about just overall our favorite horror movies of all time. We could do a top 5. I know Wally wrote out a top 5.
I think we already talked about most of them. Let me see.
Well, let's just each
Yeah.
go through each one. Just do our top 5. Let's not do a round robin. Let's just do a complete top
Okay.
5. So
All right.
All mine.
I'm moderating, so I guess I'll go first. My top 5, number 5, 28 Days Later. It doesn't scare me, but I love the plot, and it's one of those movies where you can kind of watch it more than one time. 4, 30 Days of Night is the only movie that will make me shit my pants.
Nice.
It scares the absolute shit out of me. 3, Alien, obviously. 2, the It remake, and number 1, Poltergeist. I absolutely fucking love Poltergeist.
Nice.
So you
you have a list ready, Wally. So why don't you take it up next?
Well, mine is very similar to what I talked about earlier. My number 5 was It Chapter 1. That's at number 5 because Chapter 2 was not great. Scream is my number 4. The Frighteners is number 3. Frailty is my number 2. And The Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn, is number 1.
All right, so my list really isn't in any particular order because I love these movies so much. But let's go ahead and say number 5 is Evil Dead 2, still one of my favorites of all time. 4 would probably be I'll say Halloween 3 is number 4. Number 3 is gonna be They Live. Number 2 is The Thing by John Carpenter. And then number 1 is, of course, In the Mouth of Madness by John Carpenter.
Nice.
Yeah, saw that coming. But obligatory
Alien...
shout out to Mississippi River Sharks as well.
Yeah. But Alien comes up a very close number 6 because I actually went and saw that last year, year before for the Retro Cinema at the local Grand Theater, and they played Alien. Holy crap, that movie's even better on the big screen.
So, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about the people who say that Aliens is better than Alien? Because there are a lot of people out there that say that.
I think Aliens is a great action movie. I love Aliens it's probably one of my favorite sci-fi movies because I would say that movie's more sci-fi than anything. But they're two I believe Alien is a horror movie. Aliens is an action movie. So there's really kind of no cross there for me.
Yeah, that's somewhat true. Do you agree with that, Wally?
I do agree with that, yes. Because
Yeah.
Aliens is not scary, so it's not a horror movie, but at the same time, there are very memorable lines and moments in the film. Game over, man, game over. But at the same time, it doesn't have that same overall atmospheric dread or the shock value of seeing the chest burster.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't have the same impact.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing I want to ask you guys before we go, and I want to bring this up. I've been seeing a lot on streaming services, The Terminator under the horror category. Do you guys consider the original Terminator movie to be a horror movie?
Yeah, it could be.
I don't.
Because it could be considered a slasher movie, but the slasher is a robot.
I mean, Cotton Ball is a slasher movie about robots. So, I mean, it's possible, but I don't see it like that at all.
No, see, I'm gonna be honest. The original Terminator is the only Terminator movie I've ever seen. Yes, I haven't seen T2.
Dude,
I'll add it to the list before you say
T2 is
anything.
one of the greatest movies ever made. That movie...
Yeah, I'll add it to the list.
Dude, that movie script should be taught in script writing classes.
Right. a perfect 3-act structure,
Yes.
wonderful. Just the way it begins sets up the way it ends in a beautiful way, and it makes you care about this cold, not living thing by the end of it.
Yeah.
But anyways, the point that I was making is that, you know, watching the original Terminator for the first time, and I watched this for the first time when I was a teenager, mind you. So,
Yeah.
you know, watching it, it's at what point am I supposed to be scared of anything? Like,
See, that's the
because
thing. It's
there's a
more.
robot, you know, hunting down Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor. They fall in love, so there's romance. They fight the robot, so there's action. But it doesn't. I mean, there's no really jump scares. Arnold isn't scary.
See, I think there
It's
should be a whole new category. Instead of sci-fi horror, there needs to be sci-fi thriller. And I think, you know, movies like The Terminator fall into sci-fi thriller because it's not really a horror movie.
right.
Yeah.
I think it's just an excuse to get people to stream the Terminator more
Yeah.
because they're paying for that fucking movie
Yeah.
to be on their service, so people better watch it.
Don't get me wrong, Terminator is one of my favorite movies, but I just never really thought of it as a horror movie. And then the
Right.
last week or so, you know, every streaming service says horror movies for October, and you look and like Terminator's the first movie on there, and I'm like, you guys are really stretching. Like that's
What?
not.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
man. Check.
more suspect than Die Hard being a Christmas movie.
Die Hard is a Christmas movie though, so
As
just
is-
jot that down.
Would you guys consider The Predator to be a horror movie? Because this definitely got horror elements in it.
it
Right,
it is on that line, you know.
it's on the line.
Right, because I know when I was a child, Predator scared the fuck out of me.
Yeah.
I was like, anytime I saw the Predator vision, I'm like, oh no, yes, you know. It's like,
think
but I
that-
was 8, so you know.
I think that
Yeah,
would
I
definitely
think-
be another sci-fi thriller.
Yeah,
right
that's
there.
that's what I was gonna say. It's more of an action sci-fi thriller.
Yeah,
You know, one of those hybrid genres and that's why, you know, I mean, Alien and Predator eventually met at the same point. Like they became the same genre at some point and
Yeah.
then combined.
Those movies are fucking terrible. I hate those Alien versus Predator movies. That was such a moment where we were like, we're about to get Aliens versus Predator, because the comic books were great, you know, back in the 90s and stuff, like the Dark Horse comics. But man, they really screwed the pooch when it came to those movies, man. I don't know what they were doing. It was
I mean,
not good.
my first clue was the fact that they were in Antarctica. And I'm like, didn't we establish in the second Predator film that they go towards more tropical climates?
Not only that,
What
but it was
is this?
PG-13. And I'm like,
It was PG-13,
no.
Right.
and it was directed by Paul Anderson, the guy who did the Resident Evil movie.
Oh,
Like,
do not get me started on that cocksucker and what he did to the fucking Resident Evil movies. They're rebooting them, and I'm so fucking glad they're gonna reboot them and actually focus on, you know, the characters
Yeah.
from the game and not his wife dressed in leather.
Oh, me and
Right.
Wally almost got kicked out of Resident Evil 3.
yeah. It's like we were doing an MST3K through the whole thing. Like that, you know, she comes. The thing that got me the most loud was when she has this Rubbermaid trash can, not a trash can, but like a dumpster looking thing, and she puts it over herself to block an RPG. Are you serious?
The thing was, is me and Wally were cracking jokes, and the theater was full of people, because I think this was opening night. And after about 10 minutes, me and Wally are just zinging one-liners at the screen, you know, and everybody in the theater's laughing because they see the incredible, you know, shit pile that this movie is too. But there was like one dude in the theater had to go get the manager, and the manager came in and told us, told us that we had to leave if we kept going. So we were like, okay, we'll shut up. That was already about an hour and a half into the movie.
Right.
So
Well,
Dude.
the funny thing is that we don't normally do that kind of thing. You know, we are normally very respectful of the film.
yeah.
Look, I think it should be an unspoken rule. If what you have to say is funnier than the movie that you're watching is good, then you should be able to say it.
Right.
Because if it's a shitty movie, you have to be entertained somehow.
Right. With that being said, what's the worst horror movie you've seen?
Oh man, Mississippi River Sharks.
Nice.
Mine
Dude,
was House of the Dead, and our mutual friend Pete still won't let me live it down to this day that I made him go to that movie.
That movie. I had to go by myself. And I almost walked out.
Yeah.
It was just so, like, the very first line of that movie spoils the ending. Like, if I would have known now that all of my friends will be dead by the end of today, I'm like, dude!
We're not supposed to know that yet.
That's a third act thing, not a first sentence thing.
Uwe Boll, how you ruin everything you touch.
Let's see. I'm Googling something right now because I know who directed the worst horror movie I've ever seen. It's an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Oh.
It's the one where the kids go to visit their grandparents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The Visit, I think it's called.
The Visit. Worst fucking horror movie I've ever seen. They're literally just like, oh, they've never seen their grandparents before, so these aren't their grandparents. It's like,
Right.
that is the plot to a bad porno. That is what that is. I never seen my stepmom before, so I didn't know it was my stepmom. It's that fucking bad.
Well, we're coming up to the end of the show, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. What do you say, guys?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. So, Wally, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Facebook.com /Wally is funny if you want to go there. I hardly ever post there. Or at the Real Big Wall. I can't remember my signal. Yeah. I'm dying.
You're at the Real Big Wall everywhere.
Right.
So, Jacob, anything you want to throw out there before we leave this evening?
Not really, man. Oh, shout out to our Patreon supporter, Ernie Kinnemer. If you're listening to this right now, if you're listening to this right now, you probably already support us on Patreon. But if for somehow you're listening to this and you don't, you should.
And we just want to say get well soon to Ernie. We're thinking about you, buddy.
Yeah.
And go check out me and Wally's movie, Mississippi River Sharks, available.
No!
We were in that movie, but we'd rather you go watch Monsters Anonymous on Amazon Prime. And that's all I got to say about that. So I'm going to go ahead and play.
And I would rather you go watch Mississippi River Shark.
Yeah, that movie's bad. Let's go ahead and get out of here. You can email us at openmikerspodcast@gmail.com. We are at openmikers on Twitter and facebook.com/openmikers. So go check us out. Follow us everywhere. We'll see you every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central. Good night, everyone. And happy Halloween.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
Oh, Pepper's burp.
All right, we are done. And someone named Hoka Gadig in the chat room. We are not talking politics and stuff. And don't ever come in my room saying Trump 2020 ever again. You can go fuck right off.
Is that what happened?
They came in and said, hey, if you're talking politics and stuff, Trump 2020, right? No.
Why did you assume we're talking politics? The title of this podcast is going to be 3 white dudes talk about Event Horizon.
Yeah,
like
I put in the title the Halloween movie episode or something like that. Like, no, we're not talking about politics. Fuck off.
That's
with that
code
shit.
for the state of the country.
I'd rather vote for a half-eaten ham sandwich than vote for Trump.
Who looked like a half-eaten ham sandwich.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to end the stream. And